good. Okay, thank you. Well, good morning, and we're here again this morning at the State Control Centre with the Minister for Emergency Services, Jacqueline Symes, Emergency Management Commissioner Rick Nugent, and Chief of the CFA, Jason Heffernan. And we have seen this morning, it has been a tough night, a really tough night for communities west of Ballarat around that Buangor region. And despite there being a cooler change that has come through the area, the fire that started yesterday in the Bangandine Rocky Road area was extremely active overnight, remains active today, but overnight we saw it change direction with the wind change that came through late yesterday afternoon into the evening that saw the fire now spreading in a northeasterly direction towards Avoca. Overnight there was well over 1,000 people, 1,000 firefighters on the ground working on the fire front, and they have been working through the night to save properties and livestock. And again, we thank them for that significant overnight effort that will continue into the days ahead. Now, we are sadly hearing reports of property loss that are starting to come through. Given the active nature of the fire and the difficult terrain in the area, it is going to take some time to assess the full extent of the damage. Also, too, they need to be able to go into areas that have been made safe. Now, there are crews on the ground from this morning commencing that impact assessment work, but again, that will take some time, both to make sure that it can be done safely and given the terrain and the active fire in the area. Can I also at the outset again give our deep thanks on behalf of all of Victorians to our firefighters, the SES members, emergency services workers, local government representatives, community volunteers for the way they again respond in such a strong and selfless way at what is also a very difficult time. In terms of the current warnings, there remains an emergency warning with a leave immediately message issued to many communities in the area that now includes those communities north of yesterday's fireground. This includes communities such as Amphitheatre, Elmhurst and Mount Cole and surrounding districts. There is also a watch and act leave now for people on the boundary of Lexington, and a leave now also for Amphitheatre. I urge people in the area that have been given this warning to act and leave now to please heed the advice and leave immediately, because leaving immediately is the safest option. And leaving immediately also means that you can head to one of the 3 relief centres, particularly if you're in the north of the area. There's the opportunity to head towards Maryborough, the relief centre that has been established overnight at Princess Park in Maryborough, but also the other 2 relief centres that were established late yesterday in Windaree and in Ararat. I also want to acknowledge that our colleague and local member for Ripon, Martha Haylett, has been working with the community based at the Windaree Relief Centre, and the official advice there is we've had around 200 people register to get access to support at that relief centre in Windaree. The Western Highway remains closed between Ballarat and Ararat. However, there are crews out there on the ground at the moment, and they're looking to have that reopened in the coming hours, and encourage people to continue to monitor the Vic Traffic website for further updates on both the reopening of the Western Highway, but also a number of road closures in the local area. And the train line between Ballarat and Ararat also remains suspended, with crews out there working to have that line reopened, and that is hoped to happen in the next 24 hours. There's also around 5,000 properties that are without power across the state, many of those as a consequence of yesterday's strong heat and wind weather that went through the state. And on weather, today, as we know, is a much cooler day. However, there continues to remain winds remaining throughout the day, which is of particular concern for firefighters on that fire front in Western Victoria. Also, though, we are seeing that weather hopefully will remain settled over the coming days, but there does remain a high fire danger rating across the west and the north of the state. I'd also like to acknowledge that for some communities there's a number of schools that are either closed or have had changed arrangements for today. Schools that are closed include Amphitheatre Primary School and Buangor Primary School, and other schools, Beaufort Primary School, Beaufort Secondary College, Torella Primary School have been relocated to Mount Rowan Secondary College, and Pomona Primary School remains relocated to Store West Primary School. And I want to thank everyone in the education system for supporting students at this time as well. And as I said, there was more than 1,000 people on the ground overnight, and that significant firefighting effort continues throughout the day. Given that, and given the ongoing difficult circumstances around the fire front, I want to finish by encouraging and providing a reminder to all Victorians to please follow the instructions. Whether you're travelling in the local area, whether you're wanting to keep an eye on your own local weather or your own local emergency situation, please follow the instructions that are given, and please never drive onto fire grounds, onto roads that have been closed, and also too, where there are areas there is a risk of falling trees. Following instructions makes the job of the emergency services that much easier, and it's also critically important in terms of keeping everyone in our community safe. And also, just finally, I would like to thank every single Victorian who is working hard and has been working around the clock to support our fire-affected communities. From the emergency workers and charities, volunteers, community members who have been lending a hand, we thank you. And I'd also like to thank the employers who have allowed their staff to go and support the volunteer effort over recent days and into the days ahead. We really do appreciate this support and assistance during these difficult times. I'll now hand over to Commissioner Nugent to add to my comments.
Thank you very much, Premier. Welcome to the State Control Centre. I can say it's been an incredibly busy 24 hours for firefighters and communities on the back of what's also been an incredibly busy 10 days post the fire from last Tuesday and then the subsequent storms that came through. In relation to the Rocky Road fire, it's just over 11,000 hectares in size at the moment. It is a significant fire, and all available efforts are being made to suppress and contain that fire. There was a significant amount of fire activity overnight as the wind changed and moved through the fireground area, pushing it then to the north. The fire has moved in the direction of Elmhurst, and you have heard there are a number of warnings that are in place at the moment, in particular leave immediately for a range of the towns and areas in that area. It is important for communities to remain engaged in the information and the warnings and stay up to date with what is occurring. It is important to ensure that you have the Vic Emergency app downloaded, but don't rely on one source of information either. Tune into your local broadcaster, emergency broadcaster as well, to stay informed. Firefighters have been working around the clock for the last 24 hours to suppress this fire and minimise the impacts on community. Strike teams from the Country Fire Authority, Forest Fire Management Victoria and Fire Rescue Victoria, and a significant amount of aircraft are continuing work on that fire here today. Our Chief Officer from the CFA, Jason, will speak to more to this at the moment, but again, the focus remains on suppressing and containing that fire. In relation to aircraft, we have 59 aircraft in Victoria today supporting the firefighting efforts. We have 3 aircrafts from New South Wales supporting us, which comprise 2 large air tankers and a large helicopter. One of those is stationed at or placed at Albury in support of the conditions and the fires that we have here in Victoria. Line scanning was undertaken overnight by the aircraft and has been invaluable to provide the intelligence necessary to understand the extent of the fire and look at suppressing activities. I was advised last night by the Air Attack Supervisor that aerial support has potentially saved up to 50 properties in that fireground. So those efforts are extraordinary in support of the efforts on the ground by our firefighters with all the other assets they have there. It has been mentioned, we believe at least one home has been destroyed. Many other structures are likely to have been destroyed, and we will understand further what the impact of the fire has been once these rapid impact assessment teams get in and start having a look at the area. But it's really important that it's got to be safe to do so and enable them to undertake their work to understand the full impact from this fire. A number of relief centres are operating. Ararat Relief Centre had 12 people attend, but no one stayed overnight. Ballarat had 200 people register at that, or Windaree rather, 200 people registered there, 18 stayed overnight, but a further 50 slept outside in caravans and in other accommodation, mostly because many had pets or they had their own vehicles that were there. Red Cross and Salvation Army are involved and supporting the work at the relief centres, and a number of aged care facilities were relocated also during the fires. Looking ahead, we're still in summer. We're still going to have hot and dry conditions, so we, in all of the emergency service agencies and organisations, will continue to stay focused on that and more broadly across the state. Just in closing, can I please thank all of the agencies involved for the incredible work over the past 10 days and beyond. It's been non-stop with the fires that we've seen go through up at Pomonal and Dadsall's Bridge area, but the work of our volunteers, our local government agencies and the rest of the community coming to their aid has just been absolutely incredible. And a special thank you to employers of volunteers, whether it's SES, CFA or other organisations. We couldn't do what we do without the volunteers, so those employers, those businesses, those organisations that support them to be away from work to undertake work to keep the community safe is incredibly valuable to us, and I just want to say thanks. Thanks very much.
Jason Heffernan, Chief Officer of the Country Fire Authority. So I thought I'd just recap everyone on the last 24 hours in respect to the fire situation leading to the next 24 hours and what I expect to see the next coming days into next week. Yesterday, as predicted, we saw those extreme fire dangers for half of the state, the western part of Victoria. Temperatures in the 40s, really strong, gusty, hot norwesterly winds up to 80 odd kilometres an hour, which saw the start of the Bayadine Rocky Road fire shortly after 10 o'clock yesterday. That fire rapidly progressed throughout the day, which then saw communities of Beaufort, Raglan and the like impacted, and firefighters sent from right across the state into those communities. We knew it was going to get worse before it got better, and the Bureau were predicting that southwesterly strong wind change to come through the state, impacting the fire ground at around 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, and that it did. We saw, as predicted, up to 80 odd kilometres from the southwest, which saw one of the side flanks of the fire, the northern side of that, turn into the fire front and make an advance to the north towards those communities there. As of this morning, the main priority of concern for myself and the incident management teams is the community of Elmhurst and Amphitheatre and surrounds. Sufficiently so, an emergency warning is in place for those communities to leave immediately. The fire is still very active. It is still being actively pushed by strong southwesterly winds. And this morning, we saw those up to about 69 kilometres an hour, but we do anticipate those winds will maintain at around 30 kilometres an hour throughout the day. We were hoping for some abatement of conditions from midnight last night, and whilst we saw a significant reduction in temperature, unfortunately those winds did not drop to where we thought they were going to be, and that's what led the fire to accelerate where it did to the point of Elmhurst being impacted this morning. In the next 24 hours, we will see some milder type conditions. We've got to get through today, get through the southwesterly winds, and then we will see a return to milder conditions, milder temperatures and milder winds. February is the traditional hot month for Victoria. It is when Victoria has its most traditional worst bushfires in this state, and we are in a traditional Victorian summer pattern, which means a bad day, you then see a 5-day period of milder conditions and then into another bad day. I do anticipate at this stage that next Wednesday is likely to be Victoria's next fire spike day. Whilst the predictions are always uncertain this far out, we are expecting to see conditions somewhat similar to yesterday. Again, temperatures returning to 40 degrees with the strong northerly winds with a southwesterly bluster coming through later in the day. We're going to be keeping a very close eye on those conditions as that frontal system moves its way across from Western Australia in terms to ensure that we can inform communities ahead and then make the appropriate arrangements. As the Premier and Commissioner touched on, significant firefighting resources were sent to the Beaufort area yesterday. In fact, we saw many hundreds of fire trucks on the fire ground and over 1,000 firefighters actively engaged, and they continued overnight. And as the Commissioner also touched on, they were ably supported by water bombing aircraft, including 4 large air tankers, which ultimately led to the successful saving of quite a number of homes. As the Commissioner indicated, we are aware of one home that is lost. However, intelligence to myself is indicating there's likely to be more. We have specialist rapid impact damage assessment teams on the fire ground as we speak now, undertaking those assessments, and we hope to have a better idea in terms of total property losses towards later on in the day. So we inform communities. We are very mindful there are a number of communities that are now out of that area. We wanting to know what's happening within the fire scene. I also expect to be significant outbuildings, fence losses, and likely to be stock losses as well, given the agricultural area to which the fire is burning. So this morning and through to the day, main focus for firefighters today will be on the Elmhurst and surrounding communities up through the amphitheatre. Again, communities in that area, you must have the Vic Emergency app open and on you. Have 2 sources of information, be it the Vic Emergency app, the Vic Emergency website, or listening to your emergency broadcaster. It is important that today you stay up to date and remain situationally aware as to what is happening around you. Those other communities surrounding the fire will continue to see firefighting efforts seek to try the work of containing and mopping up that fire, particularly around the Western Highway and communities of Beaufort and Raglan. But at the moment, our main attention is to the northern parts of that fire as it progresses through to Helmers.
Sorry? Yeah, we'll
do we know how the fire started yet?
that's from you, Jason.
Thank you. The cause of the fire is actually under investigation at the moment. Yesterday, due to the wind conditions and the fire conditions, it was not safe for us to be able to get fire investigations into the point of origin of the fire. So, as with the rapid damage impact assessment teams, fire investigators are now making access to where we believe to be the point of origin to make those determinations. So, at the moment, I'd say the cause of the fire is undetermined.
You mentioned the aerial firebombing fleet. Is that available overnight, or is there scope to use that overnight in the future?
Overnight, we did have activated Victoria's night bombing capability, which was put to use in the area. It also provided a valuable source of intelligence. As you can imagine, once last light occurs, aircraft need to land. They can't safely operate. However, those specialist aircraft that have skilled pilots and certifications to be able to fly and water bomb at night were actively engaged. When they weren't bombing, they were also then surveying the fireground, providing real critical intelligence to the Incident Command Centre, but also those strike team leaders and divisional commanders in the field to get an understanding. I can't emphasise enough, this is a large fire. It's some 11,000 hectares stretched across some many kilometres, both length and in width. So getting intelligence to the people that are trying to contain the fire is a real priority and will remain a priority today and, in fact, tonight as well. So they were effectively put to use.
How many of those night bombers have you got?
We have one night bombing capability aircraft in place.
You have reported overnight there were 2 trucks that broke down on the way. Have you heard that?
I will refer that matter to the Minister for Emergency Services. I'm going to speak to the CFA.
Given the weather concerns that you mentioned going into next week, have you got any idea when the fire might be brought under control, and do you need more resources given the weather concerns next week?
So, very large fire. The total perimeter of the fire will be so many kilometres. we've also got to remember that we have 2 fires also in the Grampians National Park at Pomona and Dadswells Bridge as well. Now, whilst they are contained currently, we did have crews actively patrolling and monitoring those fires yesterday, and I'm glad to report that there was no movement or fire activity in those areas, but we need to maintain a watch on those fires for a period of time. It will take some time to contain the fires. It'll be a lot easier in the open grassland and farmland, and where we'll use dozers and graders to create containment lines. In the bushland areas, that'll be a little bit more complicated, where we'll take extra time to cut some lines. So I do anticipate we'll have some solid containment leading into Wednesday, but it will be something that we're going to need to significantly watch. Thankfully, Western Victoria is probably the hotspot when it comes to fire dangers, and what we have seen is some real easing of conditions for bushfire risk in the eastern part of the state, particularly the northeast and the Gippsland regions, and we are able to access the resources from those regions to be able to bring them across. So at the moment, between CFA, Forest Fire Management Victoria and Fire Rescue Victoria, we're conducting those assessments today to understand capabilities of the agencies across the state in order to sustain an ongoing operation for at least 7 days.
Do you think you encourage the public to prepare for the next hot day on Wednesday?
I encourage the public to, if you haven't done so, have a bushfire survival plan. Have a conversation with your family. As we saw yesterday, when fires take hold in whether it be bushland or grassland on days that on extreme or above fire dangers, they move very fast. They move and they're very hot. So planning to make a plan on the day is almost a recipe for disaster. You need to have that conversation prior. I'd prefer it if you wrote it down and stuck it on the fridge so everyone could see what the plan is. But as long as everyone in the family understands if there's a fire, where we're going to go, what we're going to take, who we're going to tell, so our family and friends have some confidence that we're safe, and also make the simple preparations around the home. Yeah, mowing the grass, it sounds pretty simple, but from a firefighter they can tell you that when spot fires are raining down on a community, it's generally long grass, wood piles, the wicker mats that people put at their front doors and back doors, believe it or not, they actively catch fire in any ember attack. So on maintaining the property, it really does give you and your home the best chance of survival on those extreme fire days.
Have there been any reported injuries among CFA volunteers?
I'm not aware of any injuries that have been reported through to myself, no.
Were you going to give us an update as if you had heard 2 trucks breaking down? With us?
What we've heard this morning is the fire in the Rocky Road, where it started Rocky Road and affecting those communities out there, is a very, very large fire. It requires a response from all of our agencies, from CFA, FFM-VIC, FRV, we've got SES helping as well. When you are here in the control centre, watching that fire unfold and watching the agencies activate is just incredible, and I can't thank them enough. As we've heard yesterday and to be maintained today, more than 1,000 personnel on the ground. They are made up of a variety of agencies, and we will replace those today. We've had more than 175 fire trucks placed at that location, in addition to the locals. So a lot of resources are being sent to that location. We have dedicated mechanics that are always responding to any issues, and in relation to issues as occurred with FRV vehicles, they were responded to appropriately, replaced, and indeed have been a very valuable asset that is contributing to the firefighting efforts.
Minister, the Firefighters Union says that 2 trucks broke down on the way to the Beaufort Blaze yesterday, and that the ageing fleet is placing crews at risk. What do you say to this?
As I've just said, we have dedicated mechanics that are on the fire ground side by side with our firefighters to respond to any issues in response to the fleet. We have more than 175 fire trucks fighting that fire today.
Is the fleet ageing though, and is it time for replacing some of these trucks?
Look, there are always investments made into CFA, FRV in relation to the assets. What's important is we want to make sure that our firefighters are safe, and that's why we have dedicated mechanics, maintenance programs and the like to ensure that that is the case.
The union is claiming they're not safe. Is there budget to look into this?
Look, today we are focused on the fire, the emergency response. We're always happy to have conversations with stakeholders in their views in relation to investment, but today FRV firefighters, CFA firefighters, FFM firefighters, I know, are on the ground focused on protecting community and assets.
You mentioned a massive workforce of 1,000 people that need to be replaced. We've got plenty of capacity in the system to replace them and relieve them as due?
Yeah, look, we have an eye to fatigue. We know that that we have a lot of people on the ground and that those people need to be replaced. There are additional strike teams that have been doing so, and we'll have further conversations about any additional resources such as support from interstate as the day unfolds.
Are you happy with the preparedness of all emergency services in responding to this fire?
Unbelievably so. I think I stood up in front of the media yesterday morning to give a briefing following the state control team meeting, which had a feed-in from all of the areas around the state. Everyone was prepared for yesterday and they've responded appropriately, but I can't underestimate this is a massive fire. It moved quickly, it grew fast, and that's why we have more than 175 trucks. We've got 1,000 personnel, and as we've heard from Jason, the efforts will be ongoing today and into the coming days ahead of further weather next week. So this is not over, but I am very, very proud of the efforts from everyone here in the State Control Centre to everyone on the grounds, and particularly those local state control centres that are all focused on protecting life and protecting property and stopping this fire.
The fire itself, last week the Grand Canyon's fire was described as really erratic and difficult to contain. Obviously this fire is huge, I understand that, but is this fire erratic or is it describing like
Maybe like a normal fire. We need to put a couple of things in context. Last Tuesday we saw catastrophic fire danger rating. Temperatures in the mid-40s. We saw winds excess of 100 kilometres an hour, in fact recorded at 120 kilometres an hour at a nearby weather station. The reality when you have those conditions and you have that catastrophic fire danger rating, no homes are designed to survive that type of conditions. Firefighter safety, community safety, the preservation of life becomes paramount. And at least and similar for an extreme fire danger rating day, likewise there is danger to life, certainly danger to property, but yesterday we didn't see those 100-odd kilometre an hour winds, thankfully. The other consideration for firefighters is the type of fuel that it's burning in. So when we look at last Tuesday for the Pomona fire, it was principally all in timbered, forested areas, whereas yesterday, whilst it started in the forest, it soon made its way out into the open grassland. And as I said before, grass fires move incredibly fast. And that's what really elevated that fire and accelerated it towards Beaufort and Raglan and surrounding communities. And again, we saw that last Tuesday to a lesser degree, but by the time the change had come through, firefighters had managed to contain that. It just goes to show, I guess, that Victorians are no stranger to fire. The state has a history with fire. We've lived with fire for some time, and that's why it's important that communities know their risk, know what surrounds them, know how to leave an area, how to prepare their property, have that bushfire survival plan, because on days, whether it be extreme, whether it be catastrophic, and to be perfectly honest, even on some of the most milder days, you can still see fires develop quite rapidly, and communities need to have the tools available to them, the Vic Emergency app, their plans, and the preparations that they've made to ensure that they look after themselves and their families.
Can I ask you a question, just something unrelated if we're
Yep, okay, yep, sure.
It's just about an article in the Age this morning talking about education, and basically it's
Yep.
saying that 5 private schools between New South Wales and Victoria have spent more in the past year on infrastructure than half of the nation's public schools. And I know that there are calls for the Commonwealth Government to help with funding here to help bridge this gap. What do you say to this, and where are we at on that?
Look, I'll make a brief comment. Obviously, here at the State Control Centre, our focus is very much supporting the work of the significant number of people out right now fighting the fire in the western part of the state. I just will note that the education ministers, federal and state and territory education ministers, are meeting in Melbourne today, and I'll just make the observation that here in Victoria we have in the last 9 years provided significant investment into our government schools, and we are calling on the Commonwealth to both recognise that investment and provide the support that is required to be provided through the federal state funding arrangements. And I'm sure the Education Minister will be happy to come back and add to those comments once the meeting has concluded later today.
Is there a number in mind that would really help bridge this gap?
Look, there's negotiations going on right now, and our position with the negotiations with the federal government on funding for Victorian government schools is they're great schools, and we want them to both recognise the support that has been given to date and provide their share of the funding that is required under the federal state funding agreements. And again, there are discussions happening right now between federal and state and territory education ministers, and the Minister for Education can add to my comments at the end of the day. Thanks very much.